Welcome back. I want to know if this sounds familiar to you. Let's say you've spent some time working across the border in the U.S. and you've socked away some money in a U.S. retirement plan. Say it's a 401k or an IRA. You've come home and now wonder, what should you do? What is the best way to deal with that money? Should you leave it there? Should you bring it back? Well, I decided to get to the bottom of that. I spoke with Chris Gandhu. He's a high net worth planner with TD Wealth about different strategies.
In my practice, I do see it quite often. Typically, it's somebody who's worked for a Canadian company that has a presence in the U.S. And during their employment, maybe they did 1 or 2 stints in the U.S. And while they were working in the U.S., that's when they were participated in the U.S. retirement plans.
Let's just, for the purpose of understanding specifically what we're talking about, how do you define a U.S. retirement plan?
The simplest way to think about it is that it's akin to something like a Canadian RSP. So it's a plan where you've made pre-tax contributions or tax-deductible contributions. And while the money is in the plan, it's not being taxed, it's growing tax-deferred.
Why would you transfer it back to Canada?
Yeah, good question. If you think about it purely from an income tax point of view, there is no pressing need. Okay. And by that, what I mean is, while the money's in the plan, the IRS isn't taxing it. And because of our tax treaty, CRA recognizes that deferral and they don't tax it either.
Okay.
Right? But there's other non-income tax reasons that it should be considered. Okay? Most importantly is U.S. estate tax. So as a Canadian, as you may be aware and the viewers may be aware, typically you pay estate tax if you own property in the U.S. And normally we think of U.S. real estate. But the full value of your U.S. retirement plan is also treated as U.S. situs assets that's subject to U.S. estate tax. So why potentially give up 40% of the value when you could bring it home and not have to deal with that tax?
Fair enough.
Right? And there's other reasons as well. Foreign exchange is another one. Folks that are retired in Canada want sort of predictable, regular income. Why subject to the vagaries of the foreign exchange rate, right? It may also make sense to consolidate the money with your advisor here in Canada.
Right, just to keep it all in one place, you can organize it and just really optimize things, I think.
That's exactly right. And the best part of this is that the money is sitting in a tax-deferred account in the U.S. You have the ability to transfer it into your Canadian RSP. So it's not going from a tax-deferred account to a taxable account. It's going from tax-deferred to tax-deferred. And if you do this properly and plan for this, this can all be done on a tax-neutral basis.
Okay, I heard you say if you do this properly and plan for it. So I'm going to bet there's a little bit of trickiness to this. How do you actually do it so that there are no other implications?
Sure. So there's a few steps. Number one, you want to talk to your U.S. plan administrator. You're going to collapse the plan and make a lump sum withdrawal. Okay. You might be motivated to make a periodic withdrawal because the withholding tax on that is lower than a lump sum, but you do not want to do that because only lump sum withdrawals retain the ability to be transferred to a Canadian RSP. Okay. And when you make the lump sum withdrawal, there's a 30% withholding tax. Okay, so now you should be asking me, hold on a second, that doesn't sound tax neutral at all.
All right, hold on a second, that doesn't sound tax neutral at all.
Right. So the real trick to this is that withholding tax, you have the ability to use the Canadian foreign tax credit mechanism and offset other Canadian tax, dollar per dollar. Okay? So what you really need to plan for is to make sure that you have sufficient other Canadian tax that you'll be able to fully soak up the withholding tax, because if you don't use it, there's no carry forward. Right? So if there's a $100,000 IRA, 30% is withheld. You want to make sure you have sufficient other Canadian income that you can use up that $30,000 withholding tax to offset the Canadian tax.
And this is why you have to talk to someone who knows what they're doing, so you make sure you do this, because yeah, it has to be done right. What about, I know you mentioned before when you were chatting, there's some other things you have to be careful with this in terms of this. You can transfer, this IRA or 401k back into your RSP, but not a spousal. That's
exactly right. So that's one of the things you need to be aware of. The other thing would be is that if you're under the age of 59 and a half, in addition to the normal withholding tax, there's another 10% penalty tax, and you probably want to avoid that as well.
Last question for you. If you are planning on retiring in the States, can you leave it there?
It makes perfect sense to leave it there.
Chris, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That Chris Gandhu, he's a smart guy, high net worth planner with TD Wealth, and he joined me earlier this week when I spoke with him. Now, if you want to see that interview again, he spoke about some technical things. You may want to watch that one again. Here's where you go. Go to moneytalkgo.com/life. There you're going to find his interview, which will be there tomorrow. Plus, you're going to find a whole bunch of other interviews. Everything, as you can see, about your cottage, maybe something in terms of if you're going to be doing Airbnb, the things you need to think about. If you want to give away, you're thinking about giving away assets in your will. What do you do if you've got an executor overseas? How do you manage if you've got kids in the States? We've got it all solved for you there, and we've got some fantastic content there for you to take a look at.